All right, yesterday on the show, we took a short on Bitcoin. As you can see, that short is starting to make money for us now. I'm going to double down on that short. I'm going to add more to the Bitcoin short, and I'm going to go long oil because I think that that's the trade, that the only trade that you should be taking right now, and that is short risk and long oil. I'm going to show you in the show exactly why I'm taking that trade, and I think you should do the same. So we've got an early show today because I've got somewhere to be a bit later on. Let's get the show on the road. All right, just before we left yesterday, I said to you guys on the news terminal, I took a trade, I shorted Bitcoin, and I said, I don't trust Bitcoin going into the FOMC. Now the FOMC meeting is finished. And I'm going to double down on that short. In fact, I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to just go and do another 50,000. I don't know if I have enough cash in the account to do this, but let's see if I do. Bitcoin USD. Oh, gee, I'm not taking a 16x margin. Am I on 16x margin? Holy moly! I should be on 10x. That 16x is too much even for me. Okay, let's go. Oh man, I have insufficient margin. Let's see if I can take a $30,000 short here. I'm going to show you exactly why I'm taking this short. I'm not comfortable with where this market is. I think the risk return is much more skewed to the downside. I'll show you that. I'll show you in a second. In fact, maybe let's look at what's going on there. Also, guys, we are a little bit early today, so if you could just help me by liking this video, it just really helps me get the distribution. So, not happy about the current market structures. Why am I not happy? I'm not happy in a world where oil is now creeping up again. $107. You got US oil at $104. You can see it went up to as high as $113. So you got the oil price going up. And what that's basically telling us is that the market is expecting this war to last much longer than before. They were in negotiations, and at one point we really thought that they were going to get to some kind of peace deal or some kind of resolution. But the longer this drags on, the longer the market is starting to price in that oil prices are going to continue to go up and that the Strait of Hormuz is remaining closed. And that's exactly what's happening. If you look at the oil chart, this is on the 1 hour. I'm going to go into a slightly longer time frame. What you can see is when they thought that we were going to get to a real peace deal, which wasn't long ago, it was 12 days ago, 13 days ago, the oil prices were at $84. They've gone up as high as $113. And I've heard oil prices going to about $122 in some places. So the first reason why I am not happy is because if you look at Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin has basically continued to go up, right? We were at 66 or 67,000. We've gone all the way up to 76,000. We're still under this trend line, which we broke down. At the same time, the oil price is going up. The US oil and the Brent crude oil price are both going up. At the same time, you've got the 30-year T-bill, the 30-year US T-bill. We're going to talk about the 30-year US debt. We're going to talk about that now because that's creeping back up towards 5%, which is not a good sign. And at the same time, you have the S&P 500 at all-time highs. It feels like markets are completely shrugging off anything that has got to do with risk, right? So, I mean, markets with the oil price of 107 and 105 or whatever the oil price is, markets should be worried. Markets should be worried about inflation. Markets should be worried that if inflation comes, rates are going to start going up. And that's exactly what some of the Fed officials actually said yesterday. And with all that's going on here, you've got Bitcoin at, you could say, recent highs, because it's not the all-time highs, definitely not. But we are at close to recent highs. The recent high was about 79,000. We're at 76,000. And you've got S&P 500 at all-time highs. And it just doesn't make sense, right? What this 30-year T-bill or 30-year US debt is actually telling you. It's telling you that inflation is going to be persistent. That's exactly what 𝗙𝗘𝗏 says. He says, look, the Fed started cutting rates in 2024 with a 30-year treasury yield before 4%. They've cut 1.75 bips and the 30-year yield is now approaching 5%. What that means is that the Fed can control the short-term interest rate by reducing rates, but the Fed can't control the long-term interest rate because the market looks straight through what the Fed's doing and they say, look, we know that even though you are cutting, we think that in 30 years, you're going to pay a big price for this. And what they mean here is that there's a lot of inflation. If someone says the market is drunk, the hangover will be crazy. I think I agree with you. You cannot be in a situation where oil prices are high, 30-year T-bills are high, and the market carries on performing like absolutely nothing's wrong. That's what's going on in the market right now. And that's why, for me, I think it's better to be risk off at the moment. I'm usually the guy that goes full risk on, but I think right now the better trade is actually to be risk off. The one thing that is keeping the markets up is the earnings. So I think the one thing that could crash the markets down is if we get bad earnings. Yesterday, you remember when we were on the show, I said to you guys, there are big earnings yesterday. There's Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and there were a few others, and Meta, and all of them beat. Absolutely every single one of them beat. Have a look at that. Google, $5.11 versus $2.73 estimate. Meta, $10.44 versus $6.68. Despite that, if you look at the Meta chart, this is what the Meta it looks like. Look at that. Meta's about to get obliterated. It closed at $669. It looks like it could go back down to $611. And we'll talk about why that is in a second. Then you had Google, 573 versus 273. You had Amazon, 278 versus 166. You had Microsoft, 427 versus 401. So all of them beat. Some of them beat by more than others. Google beat by more. Let's have a look at the Microsoft chart. I'm actually quite long Microsoft. I bought it here. I bought it about 354. Quite happy that I actually took that trade. So why is it that despite Meta actually beating forecasts by so much that the market's about to punish them? The answer is very simple. Meta has, I'm going to read this to you. It says, Meta revenue up 33%, ads are performing better, and people are spending more time on apps. Stock dropped around 6% after hours and now about to drop much more. Why? Because the main reason was higher component prices, memory chips getting more expensive, and therefore much more capex. So if you look at their capex spend is going to go from 115 to 135 billion, because they're going to be raising a lot of money on actual capex spending, and the market doesn't want these the capex spending. The market wants these companies to be cash cows. But for now, these good earnings are actually keeping the prices or the markets actually up. So for as long as we keep getting good earnings, even though remember that good earnings here are historical, right? So these are earnings that are being reported. These are historical earnings. They're not future earnings. And so when the cracks start to show, when the earnings start to show cracks, that's when we're going to be in a bit of a problem. Until then, though, the good news is that we know that Bitcoin has been tracking this IGV ETF. The IGV ETF is a software ETF. For some strange reason, I mean, Bitcoin's been tracking this ETF. No one actually knows why. I've heard some crazy theories as to why. Investors put it in the same basket as software. Okay, yeah, but software generates like monthly revenue, and Bitcoin doesn't. So who knows why, but you can see that it actually has a crazy, uncanny correlation between Bitcoin and the IGV. And for as long as there are good earnings, that means the stock prices in the IGV can go up. And if the stock prices in the IGV go up, that means that we can get, that maybe Bitcoin can actually start performing. Right now, though, IGV expected to open a little bit lower at 84.19. Also last night, we had the last FOMC that Powell's ever going to do. Yeah, I think you can say ever. It was a nothing burger FOMC, really a nothing burger FOMC. Basically, he said, the near-term expectations of inflation remain elevated. Obviously, we're in the middle of a war. They expect inflation, PCE inflation, to go up to 3.5%. So it was all about the fact that because of this war, we've got a lot of inflation. An absolute nothing burger. In fact, the most important thing, or the biggest thing that actually happened, was around Powell not leaving. So listen to this.
Good afternoon. This is my last press conference as chair, and I will close with a few thoughts. First, I want to congratulate Kevin Warsh on his advancement out of the Senate Banking Committee this morning. This is an important step forward, and I wish him well as that process continues. The Federal Reserve exists for one fundamental purpose: to foster the economic conditions in which American families and businesses can thrive. I've said that I will not leave the board until this investigation is well and truly over, with transparency and finality, and I stand by that. I'm encouraged by recent developments, and I'm watching the remaining steps in this process carefully.
So listen, forget about the content of the FOMC, because the content of the FOMC is inconsequential at this point, because you've got a new Fed chair coming in now. And after the DOJ dropped the charges against Powell, effectively, the road is clear for 𝗙𝗏𝗏 to actually come in. The thing with Powell is, though, he is, even though he's not going to be the governor, because the next FOMC that we have in June, the governor is going to be 𝗙𝗏𝗏. The thing with Powell, though, is Powell elected to stay on as a Fed governor, right? So remember, there's a whole lot of governors, and then there's the chair, and Powell's been the chair. And generally, when the governor resigns, when the Fed chair resigns, he also resigns his seat as governor. But not in this case. So remember that Trump has been attacking Powell. And now Powell's basically said, I ain't leaving. I ain't leaving. I am not leaving. And you can see that this is what he basically said. Let me try and find it for you over here.
Criticism that by remaining on the board, you're actually taking a political act and denying President Trump the majority of the board, which as president he would have if you left.
I don't see that at all. As I mentioned, I'm literally staying because of the actions that have been taken. I had long planned to be retiring, and the things that have happened in the last 3 months have I think left me no choice but to stay until I see them through at least that long. In addition, I don't see how this will interfere. My intention is not to interfere.
What would you say to the criticism that
so
by remaining
he's
on
staying,
the board,
and the reason why they don't like the fact that he's staying is because he's not seen as a Trump person, and by staying, he's taking up a seat of a person who could be a Trump person. And I think they're doing it because of the personal shenanigans between them. Listen to what 𝗪𝗏𝗡 actually said about this. Quite a fascinating interview, this.
We look forward to the 𝗙𝗏𝗏𝗏 era at the Fed. I know you've been a big supporter. Unfortunately today, ungentlemanly,
ungentlemanly
to stay on as the governor. It's only the second time in 113 years. I don't know why. Let's just say, why did he have to do it? Why not just leave it up to 𝗙𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 for a new era?
Larry, I want to come back to the 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏, but I will say it's highly unusual what former chair, soon to be former chair Powell did. And Larry, to be clear, the last time that a Fed chair stayed on the board, it was at the request of the president.
Yeah.
And one thing I can promise you is President Trump did not request for Jay Powell to stay. I think it's highly unusual for someone who says he's an institutionalist and cares about norms at the Fed. This is a violation of all Federal Reserve norms. And I've got to tell you, also, Larry, I think it is an insult to Kevin Warsh, Mickey Bowman, and Chris Waller to think that these other Republican nominees do not care about the institution of the Fed, and that he alone can maintain the integrity of the Fed. We had the worst inflation that perhaps in our country's history, certainly in 47 or 50 years under this chairman. And I think the good news is today Kevin Warsh cleared committee. He's going to be confirmed. He will.
So they're basically saying, listen, Powell, by doing this, you're actually undermining the bank. Powell's basically saying, look, I've got to stay there to maintain the integrity of the bank and see all these investigations basically going through. One other thing which is pretty important here is that yesterday there were 4 dissents. In other words, 4 people that didn't agree with holding the interest rate decision unchanged. The 4, though, of the 4, 3 of them actually spoke about the fact that rates should be going up. And that is exactly what the US 30-year T-bill is actually telling you. It's telling you that there is a case for the next move in interest rates to actually be up instead of down. I want to see what this says. I don't think it'll happen because Kevin Warsh has basically publicly stated that he's going to be reducing rates and he's going to be using the Fed balance sheet to manage monetary policy. Okay, in the next Fed meeting, they're talking about a 3.1% chance of a cut. So that's pretty much where it is. Powell and Trump going at one another. Ben Cowen actually says something very interesting. He says, remember that when Gary Gensler was in power, we had Bitcoin at 109,000. Today, Bitcoin's at 75,000 after Gary Gensler's gone. One of the reasons is because Gary Gensler, as bad as he was, actually kept the industry, maybe we can try and say, tried to keep the industry, what's the word? Scared of doing shenanigans. And he says, while people celebrated against it, it actually marked a turning point in the industry, while Bitcoin only went marginally higher. Now people celebrate Powell's removal as a Fed chair. People celebrate it in short term, but we'll look back on this era for many years. I think it'll mark a turning point in the credibility of the Fed. So he's saying that that's effectively a good comparison there. Before we go, let's talk about the war. So on the war front, what have we got on the war front? So on the war front today, Trump is going to be briefed today by CENTCOM, right? And effectively, I think people are starting to talk about the fact that CENTCOM will brief Trump on Thursday on plans for a ground operation to take over the Strait of Hormuz, short and powerful. So people are talking about a ground operation to take over the Strait with special forces. So people talking about the fact that tensions may actually rise. That is the reason why I am now leaning towards being short risk and long oil. Why? Because I think these peace negotiations have been dragging for so long. We haven't had exactly what we wanted to have. Therefore, we are going to the probability is that we are going to get an escalation in the war. So the trade that I'm taking here is I'm going long Bitcoin, long oil, short Bitcoin. You can do this. I mean, you can do it anywhere. I mean, you can do it on the exchanges. You can do it on 𝗏𝗏. You can do it on all of our partner exchanges. You can do it straight from the news terminal. Although I don't think I've got money in this account anymore. I think I've used all the money in the account. Let's have a look here. Do I have money to take a trade? Let's try and put a short on Bitcoin. So $30,000 short. No, I don't have. I've got insufficient margin in this account. So you can take oil trades, you can take Bitcoin trades directly from the news terminal linked into your 𝗏𝗏 account. I'm giving you guys access to the news terminal for free. I mean, you can just go to the link below and you can actually do it. You can also, by the way, I didn't know this. I really didn't know this. You can actually trade oil on MetaMask. Yeah, like literally on MetaMask. Remember I said to you that MetaMask, which is like the old wallet, is actually got like a lot of new features. One of the things that you can actually do, I don't know if you can see, I don't think you can see my phone, but maybe you can. So one of the things that you can actually do is you can actually trade oil directly from your MetaMask wallet, using your MetaMask funds, which is amazing. There's a lot of things that you can actually do here. You can trade tokens, you can trade stocks, you can trade perps, you can trade prediction markets, all on MetaMask. I didn't know that. I actually thought MetaMask was like this old wallet. It's not. I think there's a lot of stuff happening here. I really do. Like the more time I spend on this app, and I wish I could show it to you. I wish I could. Maybe tomorrow I'll try and work out a way to project it onto the screen. Then you guys can actually have a look at it. But otherwise, just go and download the MetaMask app. Check your old wallets. Maybe there's some dust in your old wallet that actually works. But also you can trade. You can trade from the MetaMask app directly. All right, chaps. That's it for today. Not much going on. Bubbles are green. Bubbles are red. Markets are red. Again, I'm right now taking off risk. I'm not adding on to risk. See you guys again tomorrow. Until then, trade well, my friends.